Scared, child? You keep looking at me with those wide young eyes like I'm some kind of mystery you can't solve, like I'm standing on the edge of a dark cliff and you're waiting to see if I tremble. But listen to me closely now. I am 98 years old, and fear does not live in this house anymore. It packed its bags a long time ago and slipped out the back door while I was busy living. You think getting old feels like falling apart. That's what they show you, don't they? Bent backs, trembling hands, voices that trail off into silence. But what it really feels like is something quieter, something deeper. It feels like wearing a coat that has seen too many winters. The lining is thin. The buttons don't quite match anymore. Some mornings I pull it on and laugh because I can't remember when I first started wearing it. It has simply become part of me. Every dawn when the light crawls across my curtains, I wake slowly, like an old clock remembering its purpose. My bones complain. My lungs bargain for one more easy breath. And still I rise. Not because I am afraid of the end, but because I understand the value of another beginning. At my age, every sunrise is not a routine. It is a small miracle wrapped in ordinary paper. You ask me what it feels like to know the road ahead is short. I will tell you the truth. It feels like standing at the end of a long, beautiful song. The music is fading, yes, but you are not grieving the silence yet. You are savoring the last notes, letting them vibrate through your chest, grateful you were ever invited to dance at all. Most of the people who once filled my world are gone now. My sister who taught me how to braid my hair, the friend who shared her lunch with me during hard winters, the man who held my hand so tight on our wedding day that I thought my fingers might never be free again. They have all stepped through a door I have not yet opened. I live among memories the way others live among furniture. I bump into them in the dark. I sit with them when the evening grows long, and yet I am not lonely the way you think. Age does not empty your life. It rearranges it. It strips away the noise until only truth remains. I no longer chase things that glitter. I no longer measure my worth by the clocks of other people. When you have watched nearly a century pass, you learn that time is not something to outrun. It is something to understand. So no, child, I am not afraid of dying. What startles me more is how afraid you are of living. Let me tell you something that most people will never admit out loud. Fear of death is rarely about death itself. It is about unfinished business with life. I did not understand that when I was your age. Back then, the future felt like an endless field, and I ran through it without thinking about fences or endings. I was too busy chasing the next season, the next promise, the next proof that I mattered. I was born in a small wooden house that groaned every time the wind changed its mind. Winters were long and stubborn. Summers were short but full of dust and laughter. My mother used to say that life was like bread dough. You can't rush the rising, she would whisper, kneading hope into flour with her strong, cracked hands. At the time, I thought she was just talking about supper. It took me 50 years to realize she was talking about patience. When you live nearly a century, you stop seeing life as a straight road. It becomes a circle of beginnings and endings, of people arriving and disappearing like tides. I have watched cities grow tall and then crumble into memories. I have seen inventions that once seemed like miracles become ordinary as rain. The world keeps reinventing itself, but the human heart remains stubbornly the same. We still long to be seen. We still ache to be loved. We still fear the moment when the music might stop. In my 30s, I was terrified of everything. Terrified of losing my husband, terrified of failing my children, terrified of the quiet voice inside me that whispered I was not enough. I worked too hard. I worried too much. I mistook exhaustion for purpose. That is a mistake many of you are still making. You think the busier you are, the more meaningful your life must be. But meaning does not come from motion. It comes from attention. I remember one particular evening, clear as glass. I was standing at the sink, my hands deep in soap and dishwater, when I suddenly realized that my youngest boy had grown taller than me. It happened without ceremony. One day he was tugging at my skirt. The next day he was ducking through doorways. I had been so focused on surviving that I forgot to witness the miracle unfolding right in my kitchen. That moment broke something open in me. I understood then that life does not wait for you to be ready. It keeps moving like a river that refuses to freeze. As the years went on, loss began to visit more frequently. It started politely, with distant relatives and old neighbors. Then it grew bold. It knocked on my own front door and took the man who had shared my bed, my bread, my dreams. Grief is a strange companion. At first it screams so loudly you think you will never hear silence again, but eventually it settles into a chair beside you. It becomes part of the room. You learn to breathe around it. After my husband passed, people expected me to collapse into bitterness. Some widows do. They fold their lives into neat little boxes of regret and spend their remaining days counting what has been taken from them. I chose something different. I chose to keep talking to him, not in madness, but in memory. I spoke his name while watering the roses. I argued with him while paying the bills. I thanked him when the sun hit the porch, just the way he used to like. Love does not end when the body disappears. It simply changes its address. By the time I reached my 70s, fear had begun to loosen its grip. Not because life became easier, but because I finally understood its rhythm. There is a season for building and a season for releasing. You cannot hold on to everything you gather. Eventually, your hands must open, and when they do, you discover something surprising. Emptiness is not always a loss. Sometimes it is a doorway. I started traveling then, not across oceans, but across my own assumptions. I sat in parks and watched young couples fight and reconcile. I listened to children invent entire worlds with nothing but sticks and imagination. I befriended strangers on buses who told me their secrets as if my gray hair made me a safe harbor. The older I became, the more invisible I felt, and strangely, the freer. When the world stops demanding performance from you, you are finally able to become honest. Honesty is a powerful medicine. It strips away illusions about who you were supposed to be and reveals who you actually are. I realized I had spent decades trying to meet expectations that were never truly mine. I wore roles like costumes: the perfect wife, the tireless mother, the dependable friend. There is dignity in those roles, yes, but there is also danger in forgetting the quiet self beneath them. Aging gave me permission to meet that woman at last. Now, when people ask why I am not afraid to die, I smile because they are asking the wrong question. The real question is this: why should I be afraid to rest after such a long and extraordinary journey? Imagine walking for miles under a heavy sun, your shoes filled with dust, your shoulders aching. When you finally see a shaded bench ahead, do you curse it or do you bless it? Death, as I have come to understand it, is not an enemy waiting in ambush. It is a boundary written into the design of being human. Without it, life would stretch into meaninglessness. Urgency would vanish. Love would lose its sharp, luminous edge. It is precisely because our days are numbered that they become precious enough to treasure. I have read many books in these 98 years, some thrilling, some dull, some so heartbreaking I had to close them halfway through just to catch my breath. But the story of my own life has been the most unpredictable of all. There were chapters I wished I could rewrite, choices I would soften if given another chance. Yet even those flawed pages hold value. They shape the woman who now sits before you, unafraid, unhurried, and strangely at peace. You see, child, when you have truly lived, not perfectly, but fully, death begins to look less like a thief and more like a quiet librarian standing patiently at the end of the aisle. And all she is asking is whether you are ready to return the book you have already read. There comes a point in a long life when the body begins to speak more loudly than the mind. It does not shout all at once. No, it whispers first. A forgotten name here, a trembling step there. A morning when you rise from bed and feel as though gravity itself has grown heavier overnight. At 98, I live in close conversation with this body of mine. We negotiate every movement like old friends who have traveled too far together to pretend we are still young. Do not misunderstand me. I am not complaining. Pain is a teacher with rough hands, but it is still a teacher. Each ache reminds me that I have been allowed to stay longer than most. Each slow breath is evidence that the story is still being written, even if the handwriting has grown unsteady. I have learned to treat my body not as an enemy that is failing me, but as a faithful servant that has carried me across deserts of sorrow and mountains of joy. There were years when I fought against the changes. I dyed my hair until the chemicals stung my scalp. I walked faster than my knees could bear, as if speed might somehow fool time into leaving me alone. Pride is a stubborn thing. It convinces you that surrender is weakness, but aging teaches a different language. It teaches you that dignity can be found in gentleness, in accepting help, in letting others hold the door you once pushed open yourself. One winter afternoon, I slipped on the back steps and fell hard enough to see stars in the daylight. I remember lying there on the cold ground, my breath knocked sideways, thinking, So this is how it begins. For a moment, fear returned like an old creditor, demanding attention. But then something unexpected happened. A strange calm spread through me, not resignation, not despair, just a quiet awareness that life had already given me more than I had ever dared to ask for. It was my granddaughter who found me. She was crying harder than I was. As she helped me inside, her hands trembling, I realized that the greatest pain of growing old is not physical. It is watching the people you love worry about losing you. You begin to feel like a fragile heirloom placed on a high shelf, admired, protected, but no longer fully part of the daily bustle. That realization can break your heart if you let it, or it can soften it. I chose softness. I started telling stories at the dinner table even when my voice wavered. I taught the little ones how to bake the cinnamon bread my mother once made. I wrote letters to friends I had not spoken to in decades, just to say thank you for being chapters in my book. The closer you get to the end, the more you understand that legacy is not about monuments or money. It is about the small imprints you leave on other souls. There is also a kind of spiritual clearing that happens in late age. You begin to forgive people you swore you never would. Old arguments lose their sharpness. Old wounds lose their color. It is not that the past changes. It is that your perspective grows wide enough to hold it without bleeding. I have sat alone in the twilight many evenings, whispering the names of those who hurt me and those I hurt in return. Each name released felt like setting down a stone I had been carrying in my pockets for years. And then there is the strange, sacred quiet that comes when you realize you are outliving your own expectations. Most of my friends are gone now. Sometimes I feel like the last witness to a vanished world. I remember songs no one sings anymore, customs no one practices, jokes that make no sense to younger ears. At first, that loneliness felt like exile, but over time it became something else, a kind of stewardship. I am a living archive of moments that would otherwise disappear. That is why I am not afraid of dying. I am not clinging to life as if it were the only treasure in existence. I have already gathered what I needed. I have loved deeply. I have failed spectacularly. I have stood in hospital corridors praying for miracles and in open fields laughing at nothing at all. I have tasted bitterness and sweetness in equal measure. What more could a soul reasonably demand? Some nights, when sleep comes lightly, I imagine the threshold ahead of me, not as a dark tunnel, but as a doorway opening onto a familiar garden. I picture the faces of those who left before me, patient, amused, welcoming. Whether this vision is faith, memory, or simple longing, I cannot say, but it brings me comfort. It reminds me that endings are rarely as frightening as our imaginations make them. You, on the other hand, still stand in the bright middle of your days. Your fears are louder because your possibilities are still unfolding. You think death will interrupt your story. I have learned that it simply completes the sentence. When the time comes, I believe the body knows how to loosen its grip. The mind grows quieter. The soul, if you will allow me such a word, begins to lean toward whatever horizon has been calling it all along. So do not pity me for being near the finish line. Instead, listen carefully to what an old woman is trying to give you. Live so thoroughly that when your own evening arrives, you greet it not with panic, but with recognition. Live in such a way that you can look back without whispering, "I wish I had dared." You must understand something else about reaching this far shore of life. Time itself begins to change its texture. When you are young, days feel like coins in a pocket, plentiful, noisy, easily spent. You toss them away without counting. But when you grow old, each day becomes more like a fragile piece of glass. You hold it carefully. You turn it in the light. You notice the way it reflects both what has been and what is still quietly present. There are mornings now when I sit by the window with my tea growing cold in my hands, simply watching the world wake up. The neighbor's dog pulling at its leash, a child dragging a backpack heavier than his own doubts, the delivery truck coughing itself down the street like an old smoker. These ordinary scenes have become sacred to me, not because they are extraordinary, but because I know how easily they can vanish. Age sharpens your appreciation in a way youth rarely understands. I have also learned that fear shrinks when you give it less imagination. For years, I pictured death as some dramatic moment, a storm, a collapse, a final cry. But what I see now is something much gentler. It is the gradual setting down of burdens, the slow dimming of a lamp that has burned faithfully through many long nights. There is a dignity in that kind of ending, a grace that no struggle can improve upon. People often ask me whether I regret anything. Of course I do. Only fools reach old age without regrets. I regret the harsh words spoken in moments of pride. I regret the times I chose silence when love needed a voice. I regret how often I mistook being needed for being valued. But regret, like grief, can be reshaped if you give it enough patience. It can become instruction instead of punishment. In my 80s, I began making peace with the unfinished corners of my life. I wrote apologies that were never answered. I planted flowers in places where arguments once grew. I stopped trying to win old battles and started trying to understand them. That shift did not erase the past, but it loosened its grip on my present. It allowed me to breathe without feeling as though invisible hands were tightening around my ribs. There is another truth I hesitate to speak because it sounds almost too simple. As the years accumulate, the ego, that loud, restless companion, begins to tire. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop rehearsing speeches in your head. You stop comparing your path to the paths of others. A quiet confidence takes its place. Not arrogance, not indifference. Just a steady knowing that you have done what you could with what you were given. That knowing is what allows me to face the idea of death without trembling. I am not running toward it. I am not inviting it early. I am simply no longer at war with its existence. Life has already given me the full range of its weather. I have danced in sunshine and endured storms that nearly split me in two. When you have survived that much sky, the thought of one final horizon does not seem so frightening. Sometimes, late at night, I talk to God the way one speaks to an old friend. I do not ask for more years. I ask for clarity. I ask for the strength to remain gentle even as the world grows faster and louder around me. And I ask for the grace to leave when the leaving becomes necessary without bitterness or fear. Faith at this stage is less about belief and more about trust. Trust that the story has meaning even when you cannot see the last page. If I could give you anything from this long life of mine, it would not be a formula or a rule book. It would be permission. Permission to slow down before your body forces you to. Permission to love imperfectly but persistently. Permission to forgive yourself for not being who you imagined you would be. These freedoms are worth more than all the years you might spend chasing approval. So when you sit beside me and wonder how an old woman can speak so calmly about the end, remember this: I am not calm because I am brave. I am calm because I am finished with pretending that life was meant to be permanent. It was meant to be precious, and precious things are not designed to last forever. They are designed to be cherished while they are here and then released with gratitude when their time is done. One day, you will understand this not as philosophy, but as experience. One day, you will feel your own footsteps slowing, your own memories growing louder than your plans. And when that day comes, I hope you remember my voice, not as a warning, but as a reassurance. There is a peace waiting at the far end of living, if only you have the courage to meet it with open hands. So here I am now, child, 98 years carried in this small, stubborn frame. Some mornings I sit very still and listen to the sound of my own breathing, the way you might listen to waves folding themselves onto a quiet shore. There is a rhythm to it, a tenderness. Each inhale feels like a gift that has already been wrapped and unwrapped 1,000 times. Each exhale feels like a gentle reminder that nothing in this world was ever meant to be held forever. I am not standing at death's door with trembling hands. I am simply resting on the porch of a long journey, watching the sun lower itself into colors too beautiful to fear. When you have walked as far as I have, endings do not look like punishments. They look like invitations to lay your burdens down. I have made my peace with the unfinished edges of my story, the dreams I did not chase, the apologies I never heard in return, the days I wasted worrying about things that never came to pass. Age has a way of smoothing those sharp corners. It teaches you that perfection was never the assignment. Presence was, love was, courage was. If you remember nothing else from this old woman's rambling, remember this: the secret to not fearing death is to stop postponing life. Do not wait until your hair is silver to speak kindly. Do not wait until your knees ache to walk toward the people and places that call your heart by name. The future is a promise that can be broken at any moment. Today is the only contract you truly hold in your hands. When my time comes, and I feel it drawing nearer the way evening draws its soft curtains across the sky, I hope you will not imagine darkness swallowing me whole. Picture instead a tired traveler finally loosening her shoes, setting down a suitcase that has grown heavy with years. Picture a quiet smile. Picture relief. Do not cry too long. Grief is natural, but so is gratitude. Play the music I loved. Open the windows wide. Let laughter wander through the rooms like sunlight. Speak my name without whispering, as if I were simply in the next room waiting for you to finish your story. Because that is what life is, after all, a collection of stories we borrow from time. We tell them as best we can. We pass them on. And then, when the final page turns, we discover that nothing beautiful was ever truly lost. It was only being carried somewhere ahead of us. Take your time getting there. Live loudly while you can. And when you finally reach the same quiet threshold, may you find yourself just as unafraid, not because you are ready to die, but because you have finally learned how to live.